There is something happening in your yard every morning that no one ever told you to pay attention to. The moment you step outside, the birds don't just react to your presence. They react to how you are present, your pace, your steadiness, the particular way your weight shifts when you're not sleeping well, or when something is wrong, or when your body is carrying something your mind hasn't caught up to yet. For tens of millions of years, birds have survived by reading tiny changes in movement and behavior in every animal around them. Long before humans built feeders, long before we named the species or counted the wing beats or measured the calls, they were already reading the living world this way. Not because they care about any individual creature in it, because movement is information, and the information a body sends without knowing it is some of the most reliable data in their environment. Right now in your yard, something is being read about you. The question is what? That question has an answer, and by the time we reach the end of this, the next time you step into your yard, the birds may not feel like background anymore. Welcome to Known by Birds. This is not a small thing. This is not a fun fact about bird behavior you will forget by Tuesday. This changes the nature of the relationship, because if the birds in your yard are reading something specific about you, something that shifts when your body shifts, then you have never been just a watcher. You have always been watched, and the yard you thought you understood has been running a quiet assessment of you the entire time. Start here. Flush distance. The distance at which a bird flies away from an approaching human. Most people assume it is roughly constant. This species flushes at 10 feet, that one at 20. Adjust for how bold the individual bird is, and you have the full picture. That assumption is wrong. Flush distance is not a fixed number. It is a risk calculation, and the inputs to that calculation change every single day. This does not mean a bird diagnoses you. What it means is something more subtle and in some ways more interesting. If a bird knows your usual rhythm and your body starts moving differently, the bird may respond to that difference before you consciously understand why. Researchers have spent decades trying to identify what drives that variance. The answers they have found are real and documented, but the deeper answer, the one that connects those findings to what is happening in your yard on a hard morning, is something most people have never been told. We are going to get there. But first, you need to understand exactly how precise the reading system already is. The bird lifting its head as you cross the yard is not reacting to you as a category. It is reacting to the signal pattern your body emits. Those are not the same thing. One is a label. The other is a continuous stream of specific, measurable data. And the bird, in the fraction of a second it takes to assess you, is not asking, "Is that a human?" It is asking, "Is that the same as yesterday?" Subscribe before you keep going, because what you are about to learn will change what it feels like to stand in your own yard. Research has shown that flight initiation distance changes with details most people never consider. The direction of approach matters. Whether the human makes direct eye contact matters. The number of people present matters. How accustomed the individual bird is to humans in that specific location matters. And in some species, even the color of clothing worn by the approaching person produces a measurable difference in how close they are allowed to get. None of these variables operate in isolation. They feed into the same calculation, a calculation the bird runs in real time, updating continuously, adjusting its output as new information arrives. This is not instinct in the blunt sense most people mean when they use that word. It is assessment. Fast, continuous, and surprisingly precise. What researchers have consistently found is that flush distance is not stable even when the external variables appear identical. The same bird, the same human, the same approach path, different days, different result. Something is changing in the calculation that the obvious external variables do not fully explain. The question is what that something is. The standard explanation stops at the external variables. Clothing, speed, angle, eye contact. That explanation is incomplete. And the birds in your yard have been demonstrating its incompleteness every time you have walked outside on a morning when something was off, and found them closer than usual, or further, without being able to say why. Here is what changes the picture entirely. Birds are not simply running a threat calculation. They are running a predictability calculation. For a bird that has been using your yard for months or years, you are not a generic human. You are a known individual with a documented behavioral profile, a baseline. The bird knows how you walk. It knows your usual pace, your usual posture, your usual rhythm from the door to the feeder. It has filed that across hundreds of mornings. And every time you step outside, it measures what it sees against what it already knows. The question it is asking is not, is that a threat? The question is that predictable? A human who moves the same way every morning is a known quantity. A human who moves differently is a question mark. And question marks cost energy to resolve. Deviation from your baseline is the signal. And deviation from baseline is exactly what illness, stress, and grief produce. The inputs to that calculation, we are getting there now. Consider what a bird is actually doing when it watches you cross the yard. It is not looking for signs that you are about to attack it. It is looking for signs that you are predictable, that you will continue doing what you have always done, that the risk of staying where it is remains within the range it has already calculated as acceptable. The behavioral signatures of unpredictability, of a body that is not moving the way it usually does, are not subtle to a bird. Irregular gait, reduced steadiness in the step, a change in head carriage, a different quality to the weight transfer from foot to foot, movement that lacks its usual purposefulness. The difference between someone walking to the feeder with a destination in mind and someone walking to the feeder because they need something to do with their hands. To a visual processing system built across tens of millions of years of survival, these are not small signals. They are recalibration events. Now consider what produces those same signals in a human body. Illness, fatigue, and sleep deprivation alter posture, balance, and movement before we consciously register that something is wrong. This is documented in gait analysis research and postural stability studies, fields that measure exactly how the body moves differently when it is under load. The changes are real, they are measurable, and they are present before the person experiencing them has fully understood what is happening. Grief produces measurable changes in gait mechanics and postural pattern. Chronic stress alters movement rhythm and the smoothness of locomotion. Sleep deprivation alone, even mild sleep deprivation, produces documented shifts in gait stability and postural steadiness that persist for days. These are not psychological states that stay contained inside the person's experience of them. They write themselves onto the body. The body moves differently, and movement is what the birds are reading. Think about what this means in practice. Imagine someone who has fed the same birds for years. Same feeder, same path from the back door to the post, same routine, morning after morning until their presence is as familiar to the birds as anything else in the yard. A baseline, built observation by observation across hundreds of mornings. Now imagine that 1 week, something starts to change in their body. Quietly, before they have noticed it themselves. They are moving a little differently, slightly slower, a little less steady on the path. The rhythm of their approach has shifted in ways they have not consciously registered. And the birds respond, not to something visible or dramatic, to the deviation. The chickadee that has held a reliable distance for years is suddenly closer. The nuthatch that always flushed when the back door opened holds its position. Not because anything obvious has changed, because the baseline has changed, and the birds noticed before the person did. Backyard birders have described versions of this experience. A yard that responded differently during a hard week. Birds that held closer during an illness. A quality of the morning that felt different, and only later, looking back, did the timing make sense. These accounts are not scientific data, but they point in the same direction the behavioral science points. Tell me in the comments, have you ever noticed the birds in your yard respond differently on a hard day, a sick day? A morning when something was wrong that you hadn't named yet? I want to know what you observed. I read everyone. No researcher has put a sick human in front of a chickadee and measured the response directly. That experiment has not been run. And this is the part where it would be easy to overclaim, to present a logical inference as a confirmed finding. It is not a confirmed finding. But here is what the research does establish, and you can follow the chain yourself. Birds read behavioral deviation from baseline. This is established across the flush distance literature, the individual recognition research, and the broader behavioral ecology of risk assessment. The finding is consistent. Birds are reading fine-grained behavioral information from the animals around them continuously and updating their responses accordingly. Illness, fatigue, stress, and grief produce behavioral deviation from baseline in humans. This is also established in gait analysis, postural stability research, and the biomechanics literature that has measured how the human body moves differently when it is under load. The changes are real, they are measurable, and they are present before the person experiencing them has consciously registered that something has shifted. Put those two findings next to each other. Birds read behavioral deviation from baseline. Human bodies produce behavioral deviation from baseline when something is wrong. The birds in your yard have your baseline. They have been building it across hundreds of mornings. And when your body starts moving differently before your mind has fully registered why, what the birds see is a deviation from the pattern they already know. Birds do not know your diagnosis. They do not know your name. They are not watching over you in any way that involves intention or care. but they may know your baseline better than anyone else in your life. And when your body stops moving like you, the yard may notice before you do. Flush distance is a risk calculation. Now you know what the inputs are: gait, posture, rhythm, steadiness, the degree to which you are moving the way you always move, and the degree to which you are not. That landed in the first 2 minutes of this as a behavioral fact. It was always pointing here. The inputs change because you change, not your clothing, not your approach angle. You and the birds at your feet have been measuring that change, quietly, continuously, with more consistency than most things in your life, every single morning you have appeared. Here is what that means at the scale that matters. Your body broadcasts its condition to the living world around it, whether or not your mind has caught up. This is not something that began when you put up a feeder. It is not something that began when humans arrived on this landscape. Every animal that has ever moved through a habitat occupied by birds has been read this way. We are not an exception. We have never been an exception. We simply did not know we were transmitting. There is something strange and strangely comforting in that. The chickadee at your feeder is not your doctor. It is not watching over you. But on the mornings when something is shifting in you, when the body is carrying something the mind hasn't named yet, the birds in your yard may be among the first living things to respond to the change. Not because they care. Because you are part of the world they read. You always have been. There is something happening in your yard every morning that no one ever told you to pay attention to. Now you know what it is. The moment you step outside, the birds lift their heads not at a human, but at you specifically, on this morning, in this state, with whatever your body is carrying that it hasn't finished telling you yet. The question was what they were reading. The answer is the part of your body language you do not know you are sending. You are not just a bird watcher. You never were. You are part of the information the yard is processing. You have been broadcasting into it every morning since the first day you walked out that door. The birds built a baseline. They have been measuring the distance between that baseline and where you are today, every single time you appeared. That is not surveillance. That is inclusion. You are not observing the yard from outside it. You are in it. Birds do not know your diagnosis, but they may know your baseline. And when your body stops moving like you, the yard may notice before you do. That is either the strangest thing about living alongside wild animals or the most honest relationship you have. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had a day where the birds responded differently? A sick day, a grief day, a morning when something was wrong you hadn't named yet. I want to know what you noticed. I read every one. I will see you in the next one.